Hi, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Let's talk about something again of very importance today. Just let me just settle my chair. Okay, all right. So, let's again talk today, and I want to discuss with you a very important and a very significant and a very crucial topic. All right, and the topic is, what happens, whatever an individual is perceiving either about their own self or their immediate surroundings, their perception is not actually the reality. Their perception is actually not even close to the reality. All right, so what to do in such aspects? And besides, or I think beside understanding what to do, because that an individual will definitely know if in case he or she is aware that their perception of reality is not actually close to the reality. What the important question that I want to ask is, why it happens that an individual is very much sure about whatever he or she is thinking, either about their own self or about their surroundings, their external activities, their situations, is they are thinking that whatever is happening is absolutely as per their own belief. Whatever is happening, they know what is happening, but the reality is nowhere close to their beliefs, to their perception. Why it happens? It happens because simply the perception is not the reality in all of these cases. All right, it means the perception is not the reality when an individual develops certain cognitive bias. So cognitive bias is a psychological term, and this phenomena, a person operating from cognitive biases, it actually distorts their perception. And what is perception? Perception is nothing but the belief, their basically their belief that that individual have or has towards their own self or towards their external environment. Now when I am talking about external environment, it talks about all of those parties, individual parties that are completing their external environment, their immediate surrounding environment, that are being a part of their immediate surrounding environment. So all of these parties means it might be person, it can be situations, it can be activities, whatever is happening in the realm of that particular person's life is known as immediate surroundings. All right, so when a particular person has wrong perception towards all of these, then we say that he or she actually doesn't know what is the reality. All right, so again, this happens because of cognitive bias. Cognitive bias is when a person creates or self creates a frame of reference, and they believe that this frame of reference is the truth, and there is no truth beyond this particular self created frame of reference. So because of this frame of reference, a person creates their own barrier that prevents them from knowing the truth. Because of this false, untrue frame of reference. All right, because of this self-created frame of reference, a person believes, assumes things which are actually untrue in reality, but according to them it is true. So that's why we say it is a perception which is nowhere close to the reality. In everybody's individual's world, in their own world, their perception is always the reality. It means everyone will like to think that whatever they are believing, whatever they are assuming is the truth. But the question is, how much of this is actually the truth? All right. Whenever a particular person's perception is always the reality, that person operates from an entirely different level. It goes on a very spiritual, the meaning goes on a very on a very spiritual extent. It means that it means something very existential, it means something very philosophical, also it means also something very spiritual. When a particular person's perception is always the reality, and I have I don't know how many people are there. There are definitely people in the world whose perception is absolutely the reality, but I believe the number of such people is quite less. For a normal person, it is normal to have their perception, which can sometimes not be the reality. But the problem occurs when most of the time, whatever the person is perceiving is nowhere close to the reality. It means the person is always living in their own shell, which according to them is the truth, but it's actually not the truth. This is where the problem occurs. Sometimes, if you are believing something, if you are assuming something which doesn't turn out to be true, that is normal. That happens in everybody's life, all right. But I'm trying to unfold learnings, especially for those people where 80% plus, even 70% plus of the time, their perception is wrong. They are living with a false perception of reality. It means they're living in their own life. It means they're living in their own world, actually, if I want to rephrase it correctly. And the world that they are living in is nowhere close to the reality, it's nowhere close to the actual world. So it's important to understand the cognitive bias. So there are, as per the schools of psychological thoughts, there are 10 cognitive biases. If a particular person is operating from any of this cognitive bias, it will lead to their perception, which will never be the reality. It will lead them to have false beliefs, false perceptions most of the time, if they're living and if they're leading their life from any of these cognitive biases. So I want to talk to you about this cognitive bias so that you will also be knowing it as a knowledge. The first is the sensory anchoring bias. If a particular person is having a cognitive bias, that is the sensory anchoring bias, it makes a person tend to only rely on the first piece of information that they come across, whether it can through any senses, through feel, through sense, it means sense, through sensing something through feeling, all right, through a touch, or it can be sensing from the ear, whatever they hear, sensing from whatever they are seeing. So it can be from any of the 5 senses. So the first piece of information that such person picks up, they think that they rely on only the first piece of information and they avoid the remaining pieces of information. So again, this is a cognitive bias. It's known as the sensory anchoring bias. The second cognitive bias is known as availability heuristic. Now, a person who leads from a cognitive bias that is known as availability heuristic, it makes a person tend to value only on their own experience more than others. So they are always discarding of other people's experience, knowledge. They are always ignoring, avoiding other people's experience. They even do not want to even listen to it. According to them, their own experience matters all the time. According to them, their own experience holds the most important value, right? All of the time. So this is known as availability heuristic. So obviously it leads to a closed mindset, fixed mindset. The third cognitive bias is the bandwagon effect. So the bandwagon effect, it means a person tending to follow blindly the flocks and the masses. It means if you go, then I'll go. It is such kind of an attitude. And even if a person is going for the wrong cause, that person will also go for the wrong cause because he also went. So like I also went. If in case I want to phrase it in that particular way. So that is the reason why I said a person who operates from the bandwagon effect, they tend to follow blindly. Blindly means what? Without using their critical understanding about situation and knowledge, without using their wise mind. They are blindly, emotionally, it means following the flock and the masses, not understanding whether whatever thing they are following is for a right cause or for an incorrect cause. So this is the bandwagon effect. It means blind leading the blind. If I want to put it in a very casual, in a very, in a very simple way, not meaning it literally, but meaning it metaphorically. All right. Another cognitive bias is known as the personal blind spot bias. It makes a person tend to only find flaws and imperfections in others. They will look beyond the things which are good and they will only try to figure out and find the flaws and imperfections that are in other people. And they will also not be looking at the flaws and imperfection that they have in themselves. For them, flaws and imperfections are only occurring with the other person. They are always perfect. So this is a personal blind spot bias. Another cognitive bias is known as the confirmation bias. Confirmation bias, it makes a person tend to follow, tend to like, tend to accept only those ideas which validates their own beliefs and internal frame of reference. So even if their beliefs and their internal frame of reference is quite narrow or it is incorrect, it is wrong, they will tend to follow only those ideas. Even if they are wrong, they will try to follow those ideas because it is matching, it is validating their beliefs and frame of reference. They don't care if it is wrong or right. As long as it validates their belief, their frame of reference, they are okay with following other ideas. This is a cognitive bias. Another cognitive bias is fact and information bias. It makes a person, tend to pursue and rely on qualifications and competencies that only looks good on paper. In reality, those competencies, those qualifications might be untrue, might have a lot of shortcomings, loopholes and flaws. But as long as they're looking good on paper, such people who are operating from fact and information bias, they will pursue those qualifications and competencies. A very proper, unless a very, significant cognitive bias. Another one is a very, very common cognitive bias, a very usual phrase or term that is talked about or that many people know is the placebo effect. The placebo effect, it makes a person believe that if something will happen, it will happen. Mainly the negative side of placebo effect is seen. Like if a person is believing something bad will happen, then eventually something bad happens. And if something bad happens, that particular person will relate that it bad happens because of that reason. It bad happened because of that reason. So they will try to interconnect things which in reality doesn't make any sense. It is all placebo effect. All right. Untrue effect. Placebo basically means something which is not true. Placebo effect, it means. All right. So this is again a cognitive bias, placebo effect. Outcome bias is also a cognitive bias. A person who operates from an outcome bias, cognitive distortion or cognitive bias, it makes the person tend to judge people only on their outcomes and results and not their intentions. So such people, they are so mechanical by nature. that they will feel that only if the result is 1, that person is good. If the result is 0, that person is not good. So they will only understand situations based on binary results, either 1 or 0, 1 or 0. So this makes a person very mechanical in their attitude towards understanding other people. The empathy will be missing. I'm talking about especially those people who actually operate from this particular cognitive bias. All right. So then you will never be able to maintain or good rapport. You will never be able to create good teams. You will never be able to understand people's true potential if only you are looking at outcome and you are looking at result. So it makes things very superficial. I know outcomes and results are very important, but if you are completely ignoring the intentions, if the intentions are not there and outcome and results are not there, then that is quite understandable. But I'm talking about people who operate from outcome bias. They don't even focus on intentions of people. Even if intentions are good, but their outcome was not great. So for them, they will misjudge that particular person. Again, a very alarming cognitive bias. Another cognitive bias is pro-innovation bias. So pro-innovation bias, when a person is operating from pro-innovation bias, it makes that person an imitator rather than an innovator. It means a person who operates from pro-innovation bias, it makes a person tend to follow or create an already existing innovation. So what is already working in the market, that particular person is already creating it. So there is no innovation here. It is an imitation. So I'm giving you a very crisp understanding on the top layer, understanding about pro-innovation bias. Another, again, very common cognitive bias is stereotyping. All right, I know, like, we all are stereotypical in nature. Stereotypes, it means person tending to follow or tending to have a mistaken idea or belief about another person or a group of individuals based on their gender, look, culture, personality, etc. This is what stereotyping is all about. Example, people believing that whoever talks less are introvert by nature, or people believing that whoever talks more are extrovert by nature. People believing that whoever wears spectacles are basically geeks. They are completely always focused on education and things related to it. So these are very stereotypical beliefs, right? So we use that particular phrase. So again, this is what stereotyping is all about. Stereotyping is all about senseless and illogical, beliefs. All right. Irrational, illogical, senseless beliefs. That is why we say it is stereotypical. Your belief is stereotypical, or that is stereotyping, a cognitive bias. So this is what I wanted to discuss in today's video. My purpose of discussing it, because I know many people operates either from one or more than one of this cognitive bias. These are the 10 most common or most, found out cognitive biases in people's life. When people are operating from cognitive bias, it is either of these 10. Most of the times it is either of these 10. So my responsibility was to talk to you about all of these cognitive bias, to create an awareness. And when awareness will be there, you will know what is correct and what is incorrect. Everyone is having a smart brain. Everyone, if they want, they can always access and utilize the wise part of their mind. And when awareness is there, it completely depends on you. You know that if some beliefs, some assumptions of yours is making you live in a false perception of reality, that will never be helpful and healthy. That will only create problems in your life. Problems for yourself and might be problems for others. So it is always essential to remove yourself from that narrow self-created frame of reference and operate from a more broader, more wider frame of reference where you are looking at life from a more wider, broader perspective. And when this happens, then gradually your perception towards life will be close to the reality. And when this is there, you yourself will always understand what decisions to take, how you want to lead your life, and what are the things which is correct for you and what are the things which is incorrect for you. You will only be able to have all of these ideas correctly when your perception will be close to the reality, if not the reality itself. It has to be being the reality itself is the ideal thing, but it has to be, if it's not 100% the reality, it needs to be at least 95% of the reality. So this is a kind of an awareness that you have to create in your own self, in your mind, so that you do not operate from any of these cognitive biases. So this is what I wanted to discuss in this particular video. I hope you have enjoyed listening and learning about cognitive bias. And I wish you well. Take care. Have a nice day.